Hello, hello, and welcome Illini Nation to Illinicast, part of the Armchair Illini Network. Like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so thus far. This is Austin Berkland alongside Sonny Verma, and we are both of the Illinicast. And we have a big one today in this building right here, Sonny. The State Farm Center, that is right. Big-time matchup against the number one Tennessee Volunteers in their puke orange against the tried and true orange of the Illini. We're not going to talk about Kyle Tucker, but we could do a podcast on that. It's a big day for the Chicago Cubs as well. It seems like things are turning around in the state of Illinois for the world of sports. But let's get to this Illini basketball team. There's been some major highs and some lows that were kind of unexpected this year going into this Tennessee game. But let's get ourselves like a quarterly recap of this team before we get into the preview. So, what has been your ultimate high from this Illini basketball season, Sonny? Let's start there.
I would probably say that Kasparis was worth the hype. You know, obviously, once we signed him, a lot of folks were talking about how fantastic he looked out in Europe playing for the Barcelona basketball team. And, you know, after the first couple games, there were some reservations. Why isn't he shooting so much? Like, does he have that sort of mentality? I think he only had 9 shots in his first 3 games. And then all of a sudden, we start playing the real teams, the Power 4 teams. And I think his averages are, somewhere along the 25 and 5. And that's kind of what we needed, right? Like when we lose a guy like Terrence Shannon Jr. from last year's team and Marcus Damask from last year's team, we weren't sure who that main guy was going to be on this year's squad. And we all thought and hoped it was going to be Kasparis. We weren't sure after the first couple of games, but it really looks like we have the guy. And now, that's kind of the biggest relief for me this year.
Yeah, my biggest positive so far is that you aren't going to go 0-4 against the non-conference power opponents. I know you predicted that, Sonny, earlier on in the season, but it was a reasonable prediction. There's a brand new team. This is a team that has a lot of guys that aren't used to college basketball. You mentioned Kasparis, who's just been a revelation so far. Will Riley, who has beat up on some lower tier opponents as well, and Tomislav Ivisic, who is a double-double machine, which is just so enlightening to see as well. I mean, those guys who have not had the biggest college experience to go in to a opponent like Arkansas against John Calipari, a coach that's been there and done that in Kansas City on Thanksgiving, to get that victory was awesome. There's a great opportunity today, which we'll talk about later on, but this is a good sign that they aren't going to go 0-4 in this non-conference tough slate that's ahead of them. And then that's not even counting Missouri, who beat the number one team in the country in Kansas a couple weeks ago. So that matchup has amped up a little bit more than Illini fans initially thought of the Illinois-Missouri game coming up right before Christmas. So, again, huge opportunity today, but not going 0-4, at least going 1-3 in those power matchups is a very big positive to me.
Yeah, and even when I predicted, us going 0-4 in those premier matchups, I followed it up by saying, we had a chance to win the Big Ten Conference and, if not finish in the top 2 or 3. And again, the reason being for me was simply, I love that Brad Underwood is not backing up. He doesn't care that this is a brand new team. He doesn't care that it's a lot of guys who have not played together. He cares about one thing and one thing only, and that's to win in March. And I think that, just the way we've played so far this year, now, again, tonight's going to be arguably our biggest matchup, it shows me that the team is getting there. They're a little bit ahead of schedule for where I thought they'd be, but, again, for me, it's going to be more so let's find who the secondary guys, the guys that we know we can count on day in and day out. But yeah, as you mentioned, that Missouri game is going to be a lot tougher next week. Today is going to be a battle. Arkansas was a team very much like us in the fact that they revamped their roster, and there was a whole bunch of other storylines with that game. And, Kasparis had a fantastic game then, and we scored 90 points without really Will Riley doing all that much. And that just kind of shows you that we're only getting a glimpse of what the ceiling of this basketball team is. And I'm genuinely confident when I say that I'm very excited to see what this team looks like a month from now or a month and a half from now.
And it does feel like, at least in those two Big Ten games and the non-conference slate against Arkansas, a different guy kind of stepped up each game. You look at Wisconsin, it was Trey White, who was just a great scorer, great driver, great passer, just doing everything right defensively. He stepped up. It feels like in the last couple of games, that's what you need to see, especially knowing that Ty Rodgers isn't going to be a part of this roster moving forward. You need a defensive stalwart, and I think Trey White has kind of developed that identity, which is awesome to see. So that's also what I like, is that it hasn't been a one-man show on why Illinois has done so well thus far. It's kind of been a group effort, and you never know who's going to come off on a game like this against Tennessee if Illinois were to win. It could be Tomislav Ivicic, just rebounding masterpiece and second chance opportunities. It could be Will Riley stepping in and being that bench player that just comes off the bench and just does really great things. And then, of course, Kasparis could be the guy again, being that top 3, top 5 NBA draft pick as well. So I like the overall depth of this team, but there are just some like minor details that seem to be missed at time or two. So let's get into more of the negative of this season so far. What haven't you liked from this Illini basketball team?
What haven't I liked? I would probably say, well, I think today's going to be a good barometer for that. I do think that Illinois has a reputation right now that they can be beat up physically. And we saw that happen against Ole Miss. We saw that happen against Oakland. We just happened to be a lot more talented than Oakland, so we still came away with the victory. Tennessee is another team that plays very well defensively, and they're going to rough you up. And so for me, I think that's probably what I'll go with right now. I'm completely 100% on the Tomislav Ivicic train. I think he's been arguably the biggest surprise for me this year. Just seeing like he's much better than even I thought he was going to be. He's a walking double double. But I do have an issue with him. Like he's 7'1", 255 pounds, but he doesn't really play like it. I do wish he'd be a little bit more physically imposing. I want him to scare the opponents, and I don't necessarily think that's happening. Morez Johnson is smaller, but more of a physical presence. And I do think like if Tomislav just put it in his head that, he was going to be mean, just start being mean, I think that would make this Illinois team just all that more dangerous. So for me, it's just a lack of physicality. I think right now we're just kind of counting on our skill to outskill the other teams, and other teams know that, hey, if you punch us in the face, we do get rattled.
Yeah, this is really low-hanging fruit. The thing that I'm most disappointed in is Ben Humrichous' performance as an Illini. And you can tell that Brad Underwood's just trying to give him all the confidence in the world in press conferences by saying that he had 6 of the top 7 defensive performances in the last 7 games, and I don't buy that. You don't buy that. No Illini fan buys that at all when you see him just hopping from the lane to the three-point line, just hoping to distract his guy that he's supposed to guard. And defensively, he's not there. Offensively, he'll make the rare occasional three right now, but offensively, he doesn't bring too much to the table. Passing-wise, he's a good passer, I guess. That's his thing he can hang his hat on this so far this year. But this has just been a dud, and I think a lot of fans need to realize that there are going to be transfers that are going to be duds. You're not going to bet 1,000 on every guy you bring in. So the biggest challenge for me for Ben Humrichous and Brad Underwood is utilizing Ben Humrichous in the right way until he gets his confidence up and gets his skill level up to where he can be a productive member of this team when the team's going to need to count on him in the NCAA tournament or in the Big Ten tournament. So I think it's one of those things where it's like what Joe Madden would used to do with like the 2016 Cubs, like bring a guy down in the lineup to 8 or 9 and just say, hey, focus in on this, and then you see him slowly come right back up the lineup. Ben Zobrist was a great example of that back in 2016. So I think that's kind of where Ben Humrichous needs to be, is just pick his spots and really focus in on the effort of rebounding and on defense and just simplify the game that way.
I just don't know if that's Ben's game at all. I think if you make him focus on rebounding and defense, you're putting him out of the mental state that he's played basketball in his entire life. He's no doubt struggled, especially in particular the last 2 games. He's 2 for 13 or something like that from 3-point land. But I mean, if you take a look at his averages, he's at almost 9 points per game, 3 rebounds, shooting 38% from the field. But that's kind of because he only shoots 3-pointers, of which he's shooting 36%. Um, from the field. I'm not necessarily ready to call him a bust yet. I mean, he was huge in that Arkansas game, really
Yeah.
helping us out, spread out that offense. And I really do think that, and I've said this before on Locked On Illini, my opinion is Brad knows that if Illinois is to reach its ceiling as an offense and in March, that we're going to need Ben out there on the floor to just keep things spread out so that it keeps the defense honest and they can't necessarily just collapse on Kasparis. If Kasparis has one guy that he can just throw to every single time and he can make 40% of his 3-point shots, I think that would be huge. And again, despite that slump that he's gone on, which all of us in the Illini world are talking about, he's still shooting 35 point something percent from 3-point land. So it's one of those where we're just going to continue to monitor, and it's my hope that, especially in a game like this, hopefully he can have some sort of a Ben Humrichous redemption game, because we're going to need it. I think we'll talk about it later, but we're going to need somebody else to step up on Illinois in order to keep up with Tennessee's tenacious defense, and they've got a pretty solid offense themselves. But it's just, you can't keep playing him at the end of games when you see how he's playing for the first 25, 30 minutes. I mean, at some point, if the guy is 1 for 7 or 2 for 9, just take him out. I don't want to see him come back after a 3-minute timeout, with just a couple minutes left in the game. He doesn't offer you anything defensively, despite whatever your made up analytics say. And for the opponent knows that they can zero in on one guy every single time. And it's just one of those, I get it. Build up his confidence during the game. Let him be 1 for 7 with 14 minutes left in the second half or something like that. But when the game matters, when there's just a couple minutes left in the game, put your 5 best guys in. And right now, Ben Humrichous is not one of our 5 best guys.
Yeah, I think coaches get a little scared of changing things in the clutch after a game went a certain way, regardless of how the player is played. How many times do you watch an NFL Sunday, Sonny, where you see a defensive back just getting exposed play after play after play, and then you see it in the 2-minute drill, and you're like, why is the defensive back still in there? And then touchdown, other team, defensive back gets exposed once more, one more time, and then everyone acts surprised. So I think that's where Brad Underwood's at, sadly. Brad Underwood's a great coach. I think this is just one of his blind spots right now, and every coach has one. Every coach has a little bit of a quirk that their fans don't like, and right now that's been Humrichous. And I think Ben can have a game in the Big Ten where he just explodes for 15 points or something. That's still within Ben Humrichous' skill set and what he can do on the basketball court. So it's just tough sledding. Maybe it's a Quincy Guerrier situation like last year where there were some very massive cold streaks from Quincy, and you were like, what do you do with him? Maybe that's been Humrichous' streak right now, and he'll correct something in there. So hopefully that helps. But let's move on to the surprise of the season so far for you. It can be a positive surprise. It can be a negative surprise. What is your caught your eye that you didn't really anticipate for this Illini basketball season?
I think I alluded to it earlier. I didn't know Tomislav was this good. I thought he'd be a solid guy, maybe 8 points, 6 rebounds, a solid big that we could put in there. Just kind of a solid, not spectacular. Just a good big man where it wouldn't necessarily be a weakness of an Illinois team like it was last year. But the way he played those first couple of games, I mean, he was our best player, in my opinion. Now obviously Kasparis over the last couple of games has kind of woken up a little bit and really averaged 20 some odd points per game. But Tomislav kind of carried this team with his play earlier on in the season. For the year, he's averaging 15 and 9, shooting 52.5%. And the guy's not hesitant to shoot a 3-pointer, which is nice to see because, again, if you're going to play the style of basketball that Brad Underwood and Tyler Underwood are kind of developing on the offensive end, you need everybody on that court able to shoot the basketball. And the difference between Tomislav compared to some of the centers we may have had in the past is he has no problem shooting 3-pointers. And again, I think just he's inarguably our second best player right now. And I'm just very pleasantly surprised that he's as good as he is. I mean, I think he has the potential to be on the All Big Ten team as a center. And I did not think that coming into the year.
Yeah, I mean, it does help when Purdue doesn't have that big boy down there anymore to get a center nod at the All Big Ten level. I know he's going to have some competition with the Michigan boys, whether that be Wolf or the Florida Atlantic player. I can't remember off the top of my head. Yes, Golden, Wolf and Golden. Those guys are going to be tough in terms of front court to beat out. Derek Queen from Maryland is doing really great as well down low. So there is going to be some competition for that spot, but Tomislav has definitely put himself in the conversation to at least be second team or All-American, which is just unbelievable. All-American, good Lord. Second team or honorable mention of the Big Ten. There we go, in the Big Ten. But my surprise is kind of the disappearance of Kerry Booth. I was shocked that Jake Davis is getting more tick than Kerry Booth, like off of the bench. Jake Davis had 5 minutes in that Wisconsin game, in that 86-80 win. But you look at the bench and who didn't play, and that's Kerry Booth. I thought Kerry was going to be more of like a guy that you bring in, become a rebounder, play some tough defense, and just do like those little things, be a front court version of what Ty Rodgers was last year, of just picking your spots defensively, picking your spots rebounding wise, and that's a very valuable player. But Morez Johnson has usurped him, and Jake Davis now has taken some minutes from him, and obviously Tomislav and Ben Humrichous seem to have been Brad Underwood's trust more than Kerry Booth at this particular moment, as should be the case for Tomislav. We'll see what Ben Humrichous is here in the next few games, but it is a little shocking to see that Kerry Booth has just had a disappearing act from this rotation.
And it's wild because I'm looking at his stats. Like, he started 19 of 33 games as a freshman at Notre Dame last year. And now he's just flat out getting DNPs. You know, as you mentioned, a guy who I thought they might have redshirted, Jake Davis, is coming into the game before Kerry is. So, like, for me, it's just, I know he's small, and, you know, I wish he was bigger, and he may need a summer of Fletch ahead of him. I just don't know in today's college world if he's going to be wearing blue and orange if he continues to not play this season. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, Kerry Booth, even DGL, I thought would have a little bit more of a role on this year's team. I really imagined him being that sixth man, you know, playing that Justin Harmon role from last year, averaging close to double figures. He hasn't really come close to that this year. You know, two guys who, as Jay's kind of referencing in the chat just now. By the way, if you are watching this, please hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so that you never miss our shows, pre-games, and we'll be going on at halftime as often as we can. We thought
we may even do a live stream of a full game, Sonny.
I'm absolutely down for that. Every year, as Jay just mentioned, we always think that we have a very deep team. And this year is no different. I really thought that, hey, we have 10 good basketball players on this team. Like, how is Brad Underwood going to divvy up those minutes? Well, it looks like Brad only trusts 8 of them. And again, you know, Kerry Booth is just basically non-existent. I'm very surprised that DGL is only playing 14 minutes a game. You know, I really thought that would be closer to 20. Brad knows his guys, and he's going to run with those guys. He's referenced in, you know, the post game, I believe it was against Northwestern, where he's like, yeah, I should have gone deeper into my bench. And I certainly hope he eventually does. But yeah, I think Kerry Booth, if we're going to go on the negative side, he's probably been the most surprising in a negative way on our team this year.
What would be your grade for Kylan Boswell so far this year?
A minus. I was worried about if he'd be willing to, you know, obviously he's the first big guy that we got this offseason. You know, the team looked almost empty when he signed on, and he personally may have felt like, hey, this is former 5-star coming back home. I'm going to lead this team. I'm going to be the guy on this team. This is going to be a great story. Then all of a sudden, just a month and a half, 2 months later, we get two prospects who are graded out higher than him, and he almost becomes not quite an afterthought, but a guy like, hey, what's his role going to be on this team? He just did this with Caleb Love. Is he going to be willing to defer again to a guy like Kasparis? And to me, every interview I've seen with him, every article I've read about him, he's completely embraced his role as, hey, I'm the veteran on this team. These guys can shoot. These guys can score. They don't necessarily need me for that. I'm going to lock down the guy that we need to lock down on the opposition. And he's talked about how Brad really coached him up for that role this offseason. And there's a lot of Arizona fans out there and media members who were not exactly sad when Kylan was leaving. And, they kind of dictated that maybe mentally he had to mature a little bit, but I haven't seen anybody from the Illinois side. And that's, whether they're directly involved with the basketball team or on the content creating side, a writer, anyone covering the basketball team who's had anything to complain about Kylan. He understands his role. He's played his role to a T. He's bottled up potential All-Americans. And, there's a big opportunity tonight to do the same exact thing. And so for me, I wouldn't say quite A+, because I, of course, hope eventually, I don't think his 3-point shooting is all that good right now.
22.5. Yeah,
exactly. His 3-point shooting, we're going to need a little bit more for the style of play that this team does on the offensive end. But just defense alone, I have to give him an A-.
Yeah, still 10.1 points per game. Like, if you would ask a Illini fan who hasn't studied the stat lines of these guys, they'd say, oh, Kylan probably 4 points a game. And that's what it kind of feels like some games where you're like, oh man, Kylan didn't show up this game, but it's a lot because of those misses of those shots, 22.5%. That needs to improve for a guard, yes. But still, 10.1 points per game, 3.8 rebounds, and 3.7 assists per game, and then the defense to match. That's a really solid player, and he's not the star that a lot of Illini fans thought he would be to take the helm of this team, but my goodness, what a change in attitude, like you said, Sonny, about what he did in Arizona to end the year versus coming in here and really being Ty Rodgers. He is our Ty Rodgers this year, and with a little bit more scoring to boot, and I believe that jump shot's way better than Ty Rodgers ever will be, so I think it just needs to click a little bit. Maybe it'll be 3 Big Ten games in a row where you're like, oh wow, he only missed 5 3-pointers in those 3-game stretch, so maybe that's something that'll take place later on in the season, but you just gotta love what the attitude and the mantra of Kylan Boswell has been. And another guy I want to mention in terms of returning college players transferring in Illinois, Trey White. He has just been phenomenal this year with his ability to be a team leader, his ability to be a scorer. His defense has just propelled from his time at Louisville, which I don't think you're getting the best coaching at Louisville last year. But he has really taken on the mantra of what everyday guy means. And I think Trey White needs his flowers for what he's done this year.
Yeah, I think Trey kind of understands his role on this basketball team. There's a lot of noise out there about having, Will Riley start in his place. And ultimately, I think, a month and a half from now, that very well might happen. But you also see where Trey becomes valuable, like that game against Wisconsin. When he can out of nowhere give you 23 points, 8 rebounds, and an assist. He's averaging 9.5 for the season, shooting 51%. That's all you can really kind of ask for the guy. He does tend to have a couple games here and there where it looks like he's just getting a good cardio in. He doesn't really show up much in the box score, but obviously Brad talks about it all the time. He's very good at doing things that don't necessarily show up in the box score. And that's why he continues to play the minutes that he's playing.
I think overall on this team, one area that needs to improve is free throw percentage. Illinois has not been the best free throw shooting team this year. You have Trey White at 91.7%. Only three guys are above 80%, and that's Kasparis, Dre Gibbs, Lahorn, and Trey White. And Dre hasn't been to the free throw line often compared to the rest of those guys just for minutes. And then you have a bunch of 60+% three-point free throw shooters. Pardon me. That can't happen in an NCAA tournament. You're gonna need to make free throws, but that's one thing Trey White's brought that you don't really see on the stat sheet too much is consistency at the free throw line, which is absolutely needed for this Illini basketball team.
It's just tough. This free throw thing I feel like has been a problem with Illinois forever. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't remember the last time we had a basketball team where I was confident, in our team free throw shooting. We had good individual players here and there, but yeah, if there's one thing Brad Underwood has never been really able to um, do well is field a team that shoots free throws well.
All right, let's change pace into tonight's game. 4:30 p.m. tip-off on Fox. Tennessee is a 1.5 favorite, which, interestingly enough, it started out as a 4.5-point favorite today, shifted 3 points toward the Illini. So I wonder if there's big money coming in for the Illini, some sharps that are like, hey, Illinois might have a chance here. So that does give me some interesting thoughts on this game where it's like, hey, maybe it's going to be much more in Illinois' favor than Illini fans think.
Yeah, I mean, the last couple of games, the line has moved the opposite direction. So this is the first time that the money is actually coming in on Illinois, which is kind of nice to see. And as you said, these Vegas folks, they tend to know what they're doing, and so not that it means anything, but it's kind of a good feeling, Austin, that we are a team that's unranked, and we have the number one team in the country, not just a good team, a team that many have called the favorite to win the national title, coming into Champaign, and we're only 1.5-point dogs. That just kind of continues to show you how far this program has come and how much Las Vegas kind of respects this team. Again, I think I don't mean to speak for you, but I think this team absolutely is a top 20 team, and I don't understand how we're not ranked right now. And it's just one of those where I thought the line originally, when I tried to guess about a week ago, would be around 6.5, 7. So even when it opened at 4.5, I was like, oh wow, they're really giving some respect to Illinois. And the funny thing is, a lot of the actual bets being placed are on Tennessee from the last time I saw. It's just the big money is coming in on the good orange, as you referenced earlier.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Tennessee team that's kind of on fire as well. They destroyed Miami 75-62. Syracuse, they drubbed them 96-70. UT Martin, that's whatever, 78-35, but they beat Baylor 77-62, and then Virginia 64-42. So this is a team that's laid some thumpings against Power 5 opponents, and to see Illinois only a 1.5 underdog, even if it's in Champaign, gives me a lot of optimism just because of what Kasparis has done. Kasparis has decided, oh, I figured out college basketball. I can score against these guys. And I think that's kind of what his struggle was earlier on in the year, where he was like, I'm still trying to figure out this college basketball game. And now it feels like he knows what he can do. He knows how to do it. And his shooting has just been absolutely just killer. His fadeaway 3-point shots that he's able to make, his NBA level shot making is incredible. His passing, he knows where guys are going to be at before they even know where they're going to be. It feels like he is a guy that can take over a game, and I hate using this term. He's a white European guy, but Luka Doncic.
I know.
It's so difficult. I don't want to do it, but I have to. Luka has just whenever he's going up against some top-notch opponents, you've seen it in the bubble as well back in 2020, where Luka just is like, all right, I'm going to win this game for the Dallas Mavericks. And I feel like Kasparis is on that trajectory for the Illini to making sure that he leads Illinois to victory and doesn't matter what everybody else's stat line is, as long as Tomislav is getting a double-double, helping him out on the offensive boards. I mean, that's kind of where Kasparis' game is at for the Illini.
So the funny thing is, Luka's my favorite player in the NBA, right? And so what Luka's very good at is in his draft report or whatnot, the projections was he's too slow for the league. He's not an athlete. A lot of things that could be said about Kasparis. Kasparis is not a fast guy. I wouldn't say necessarily he's an athletic guy. He's not a quick guy. But what Luka does, which is kind of what Kasparis is very good at, is he knows how to get to his spot. And he knows just to get the amount of space that he needs in order to shoot the shot that he wants to shoot. And so, like, that in itself is a skill. He's strong enough. He's what, 6'6", 220, I think, something along those lines. Like, he's bigger especially for a guy who essentially plays lead guard, maybe even point guard for this basketball team. So he's bigger than a lot of guys. But even when
Body by Fletch Express did wonderful just in a short amount of time.
once again, Fletch is a cheat code, like I always like to say on the social medias. Kasparis is just one of those guys where even when he's switched on and there's a 7'1" guy on him, and he knows the exact amount of space that he needs to step back and still get the shot over an outstretched arm. And that's not a skill you can teach. That's just something that Luka has, to an insane level. And of course, neither you or I are saying Kasparis is as good as Luka, especially, he's a couple inches shorter. But it's still a skill that I think that just comes through instinct. And it's just, you just have it or you don't. And Kasparis has it. And right now, we're very fortunate because, I got to have fun with you. You called me out on my 0-4 prediction for the out of conference. We did have a group chat where Austin's like, I don't think Kasparis is ready for the NBA earlier. And I think he's reeled off 4 straight 20-plus point games after that.
I mean, after every shot, that seems like a dagger right in that text is just like, oh my gosh. But it's unbelievable to see, like, what he's able to do. And I think it was just his, like, confidence in what he can do in this level. Like, I'm sure there was unfamiliarity there. Like, you're in these tough environments. Like, I know Europe has its own tough environments in basketball, but some of these schools are just rabid, and I don't think that you're really used to it from people your own age instead of like seeing the crazy 45-year-olds at these pro European games. I think that it's a little bit different seeing from your own age group. But he's taken that mantle of one of the top freshmen in the country. It's between him and Cooper Flagg, it feels like, and maybe you add Igor Demon in there and the Rutgers guy as well. So that's really your freshman All-American team right there, it feels like. So just an unbelievable job by Kasparis of taking the mantle right there. But also there's another freshman for the Illini that I think has to play really well tonight for the Illini to win, and that's Will Riley. I think he's got to be an efficient scorer tonight. I feel like he's got to avoid those silly turnovers that he has because he does try to get a little too ball dominant at times, and it really wreaks havoc for the Illini. But if he's able to just build some consistency in his ball handling tonight, I think that's going to be crucial for the Illini just to get that huge score just right there in Tennessee's eye.
As Philip in our chat knows, because he's in our Discord, we talk about basketball as we're watching the game. Like, I've said this about Will Riley. Will Riley is the younger brother who's supremely talented, who's just so excited to play with he got invited to play with his older brother. So when he has the ball, you kind of just want to scream at him just to calm down. Just go, you are a walking bucket. But I feel like he just uses a lot of unnecessary energy and movement when it comes to playing. I said the same thing in my preview for Locked On Illini for this game. I said that if Illinois is to surprise Tennessee and upset Tennessee, that we need to have the second Will Riley game, because I think Tennessee is so good defensively that if I'm Rick Barnes, I'm like, hey, don't let Kasparis beat you. Let somebody else beat you. And Will Riley is that second guy who, again, he can play 15 minutes against Wisconsin, but he can score 30 in a game like today against Tennessee. And I think we're really going to be counting on him. He's got to become a little bit more consistent in order for us to win the Big Ten championship, which I genuinely think we're capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, you want the new guys to play as confident as possible tonight. That'll give you a really great shot to win. Will Riley, Kasparis, and Thomas Loff. Thomas Loff seems to just confident. There's no lack of confidence there with the 3-pointers that he takes and just his ability to score offensively. Defensively, you need to see a little bit more toughness, like you talked about. Like I kind of want just like a Draymond Green to come and punch him in the face, try to piss him off. That's kind of where I want to see him just explode right there defensively. But I also think you need the guys that have been there, done that in the college basketball world. Kylan Boswell has been in tough games like this with Arizona. Trey White was at Louisville in the ACC. He's played against Duke. He's played against North Carolina. He's played in these big-time environments, even on the road, in tough environments in college basketball. So if those guys are able to just steady the ship at times, Tennessee's going to go on runs. It all depends on whether it's a 5-point run or if it's an 11-point run. You need your stoppers to stop those runs, and that's going to be Kasparis. That's going to be Kylan Boswell due to his leadership, and that's going to be Trey White just because of his athleticism and has been there, done that in the ACC. So I really think that if those things happen, the leaders be leaders and the freshmen don't shoot themselves in the foot, I think Illinois will win this game, but that's a lot of ifs for 5 players right there.
Yeah, for me, it's, I talked about Tennessee obviously being the number 1 team in the country, being the best team that Illinois potentially might play all season long. As Philip brought up in his latest comment, like Illinois could very well be the best team that Illinois or that Tennessee has played this season as well. So, I mean, they're in for a fight. The word is still out on how good of a defensive team we actually are. A lot of us thought we'd be an awful basketball team on the defensive side. Brad Underwood called us out, after that exhibition game. But right now, the analytics are pretty kind to us. Last check, I think, was previous to the Wisconsin game. We were in the top 25. Again, we have different roles for these guys on the defensive side. It's nice compared to last year where we didn't have a natural point guard to guard other point guards, and we didn't have a natural center to guard an actual center from last year's team. And so that in itself is a huge upgrade on this team where we do have guys who can just, play the guys opposite to them, and there's no big size mismatch. And if there is, it's usually on our side because we're such a tall basketball team. But I can't say I'm that optimistic about today. Not that I'm trying to be a Debbie Downer, but I'm just kind of sticking to my mindset that I had in the preseason, just thinking that, hey, this team needs games like today, because games like today are going to kind of be a preview of what a game is going to be like, at Mackey or at Assembly Hall, or, in those tougher environments once the Big Ten season really rolls around. And I mean, I don't know if we're giving predictions yet or if you want to move on later, but I think we're going to lose and it'll probably be close to double figures.
I think it's going to be a game like Illinois-Purdue at the State Farm Center last year where I'm going to be like, wow, this is a really good basketball team, but ultimately ends in a loss. And it's going to be like, oh, a couple bounces of the ball didn't go Illinois' way, and that's the reason they lost. But it's not going to be like a despair of, oh my gosh, what is this Illini team look like? This is horrendous. I think there's going to be some massive positives from this game. But I think when you go against just guys like Shaz Lanier, who averaged 19.1 points per game, that's going to be a tough ask for this defense, who has yet to answer the bell in a big-time way against a big-time opponent. I know they won against Arkansas, but Illinois was shooting the lights out against Arkansas there. So I do think a defensive showdown does not lend itself well to Illinois. So I think it's going to be like an 85-79 game where a couple foul shots make it to be more than a true two-possession game at the very end. So that's where I'm leaning at this game. But it wouldn't shock me if Illinois were to come out and just go gangbusters from the 3-point line, win by 5 points, and then it's like, hey, great job, Illinois. You beat the number 1 team in the country. But again, I'm not really anticipating that until I see it multiple times because, again, this is a team that lost to Northwestern in overtime. They blew a 10-point lead against Northwestern. They about blew a 10-point lead against Wisconsin as well. This team just does not have the mental fortitude yet for a game like this. Will that come? Absolutely. But is it there now? No.
It's interesting. Like, I want to kind of piggyback on what you just said. Like, this is a team that I said earlier in the year could sleepwalk to 80 points. Right? There's literally the number one team in the country is coming to Champaign, and I'm not saying it's an automatic loss. Like, this is any game, Kasparis can go off for 15, 7, and 7. Will Riley can have 20 points, 8 rebounds himself. Ben Humrichous can hit 3-4 3-pointers, and all of a sudden we've hit 90, 95 points without even thinking about it. And
Yeah.
there's just so many few teams out there that can actually do that. But that's why on any given night, Illinois can win and beat anybody, including the number one team in the country. Tennessee is just a tough matchup because they're a lot like Illinois in the sense that they're very talented, but all their best guys are seniors and juniors. And, guys who've, had a few years now worth of experience playing college ball, and, they've played in those tough environments and whatnot.
They've been to Rupp Arena. I don't think State Farm Center is going to be that scary to them.
Right. So, I think that's kind of the difference. It's just the experience factor, and that's kind of why I still think that Tennessee ultimately comes through today. But I hope Philip's right. Philip actually predicted Tennessee was going to win like a few days ago, almost a week ago. So, Philip, I have some faith in you. I hope you're right.
But, again, like you said, this is kind of where UConn's been the last few years. This has kind of been where UNC has been the last few years. Like, any game you can win and any game you can lose. So look at UConn in the Maui Invitational. They lost 3 straight games in a row. Do I think UConn's a bad team? No, absolutely not. Once March hits, Mr. Hurley can conjure magic during that month. So I really think that Illinois is in an outstanding place as a college basketball program where you can literally win any game that you play.
Yeah, the only thing I don't want to see is like a 25-point loss. If we keep it relatively close, I don't think many people have us winning this game. But it's like if we can make it competitive but still lose by 10, 12 points, again, I'm still going to feel optimistic about what this team looks like in March. What I don't want is, we got beat down by Alabama earlier on in the year. And then if we have kind of a repeat performance against Tennessee, and then we're going to have a really intense matchup against Missouri, very soon. It's like, I just don't want to see us getting blown out. As long as we're competitive, and I want us to be more competitive than we were in that Alabama game, I'll be happy. I'll be content. I just want to continue to see the maturation of Kasparis, who at this point I have zero concerns about. My concerns more so lie on, can Will Riley, continue to get better every single game where we can count on him to be Damask from last year. We know that Will's going to get his 15, 17 points regardless, and he's not going to have, playing with all that, extra spaz energy that he tends to kind of play with. For me, it's like, I want to see how the other guys continue to develop. I think this is a big Avicic game because, again, Tennessee has big physical basketball players. Okpara, we saw him he was playing for Ohio State the last couple of years. He's another guy who, he's a big physical guy, which Avicic is not. I want to see Avicic get punched in the face and come back and still score 17 and 11. That will give me more optimism and confidence going into that tougher Big Ten schedule where you mentioned, like, there's a lot of good big men in our league this year. And I truly do think that Avicic is right up there with the best of them. But I want to know that, when he needs to be mean, he can be mean.
Yeah, and that's where a guy like Morez Johnson comes into play. Like, where once he comes in, he could be the huge sleeper agent of why Illinois wins this game if he's able to get like 6 rebounds and you're like, oh my gosh, Morez just was flying around the basketball and everything. So he's a guy that needs to come be physical as well to really stifle these Tennessee big men down there. So this game is going to be rather interesting. Like, I could see it going 7 different ways, which is kind of hilarious. Only knowing that it's only a point and a half underdog at home, but again, this game could go literally any way. It could be a 25-point loss, like against UConn, like we've seen. This could be a 10-point victory just because of the 3-point shooting. This ultimately will probably be a tight game, going either way, just because of a team getting a few more rebounds or a team making the less mature mistakes. So I think that's where this game is going to lie, and it's a fascinating game tonight, Sonny.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's the whole country is going to be watching us. I think we're on one of the main channels, right? Is it Fox today?
Fox, yeah.
Yeah, Fox. Like we got a little thing, something to brag about. That Illinois just had like the most watched college basketball game in like X amount of years. They came out in I think that Thanksgiving game against Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a repeat performance. Let's the country. Let's introduce Kasparis to the country because he is a really, really good basketball player. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does today against a top-notch defense. But I'm really hoping that we have that secondary guy, step up as I've mentioned earlier today. It's a game I can't wait to watch, and I just hope we stay competitive. I think we will, and I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. We'll be back with more episodes of the Illinicast to talk about this game. We'll recap it at some point, and then be on the lookout for more content as the transfer portal heats up for Illinois football. I'm sure commitments are going to start rolling in for the Illini after some visits, and just the world of college basketball is going to be spinning like nobody's business with huge non-conference games today on Saturday. Purdue already lost to Texas A&M, and so this is going to be an interesting Big Ten, and I can't wait to see how this weekend unfolds. And we'll be there. We'll be back to talk about it next week.
And I can't wait to have Braden Smith go meet Kylan Boswell in that game. I think it's the last game of the year. I can't wait for that matchup. We'll see. Purdue is not the team that they were last year. Go figure. Everyone except for Purdue fans knew this was going to happen.
I can't wait to out-rebound Purdue. That's going to be amazing. That's going to be amazing. A bunch of Zach Edey merchants last year, and now they're just a regular team. Sorry, Purdue, but you're done. It's over with. But yes, subscribe to the Illinicast on YouTube. Like us on Twitter, and like Armchair Illini on Twitter and on Instagram, Facebook. They're all over the place, giving great written content for the Illini, and then the Illinicast is the audio arm for Armchair Illini. So give it up for Kirkland and Alex as well. So this has been Illinicast, Illinois, Tennessee tonight at 4:30 p.m. on Fox. Illinois is that 1.5-point underdog. So thank you all for watching, and share this with a friend if they're driving to Champaign as we speak. So, Sonny, thank you. ILL.
I and I.